Dungeons & Dragons has been a gaming phenomenon that's lasted over 4 decades thanks to their devoted fans. In part, it was made pop culture cool by the nostalgia for the 80s, as Stranger Things so clearly proved. Now the fantasy role-playing game is being given the Hollywood treatment, and a movie based off of the famous game was recently announced. And in today's video, we'll be going over everything you need to know about the Dungeons & Dragons movie. But before we get into the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on, so you don't miss any of the new videos we post. The Dungeons & Dragons movie, as stated in the title, is based on the iconic fantasy tabletop role-playing game of the same name, sometimes better known as D&D. The game, which was designed by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, first became popular in 1974 and has since gained millions of players and fans worldwide. The game is known for its war games, treasure hunts, camaraderie, and reversals of fortune, all in a fantasy setting that combines humans, elves, orcs, and hundreds of other creatures. The game famously uses multi-sided dice in gameplay to decide the plot's progress and is overseen by a host known as the Dungeon Master. The hugely popular game has also influenced numerous writers, directors, game designers, and other creative professionals throughout its 4 decades. We're thrilled that this beloved property can finally make its way to the big screen after 20 years, and that it can be realized by Warner Brothers, which has been responsible for the biggest fantasy franchises over the past 2 decades, said the original director and producer of the 2000s Dungeons & Dragons movie, Courtney Solomon, who is also a producer on the upcoming project. Speaking of the 2000s Dungeons & Dragons movie, this upcoming movie obviously isn't Hollywood's first attempt to bring D&D to the screen. In 2000, a live-action Dungeons & Dragons movie arrived starring Justin Whalen, Marlon Wayans, Thora Birch, and Jeremy Irons. The adaptation was strictly a fantasy film, which used the overall gist of the game to create its plot and characters, though whether the new version will follow this remains to be seen. But what is known is that the directors of the new D&D movie plan on making it a bigger hit than the previous one, as the 2000 film was torn apart by critics and only made $33.8 million on a $45 million budget. And while that's not a blockbuster by any means, that didn't stop the release of 2 sequels, a made-for-TV sequel called Wrath of the Dragon God and a direct-to-video sequel titled The Book of Vile Darkness. In addition to the new Dungeons & Dragons movie, E1 is also developing a Dungeons & Dragons TV series, with John Wick franchise writer Derek Kolstad handling the script. On top of that, E1 is said to be working with and looking for multiple writers to develop various projects set in the fantasy universe. Now, onto the current and upcoming D&D movie and what is expected. Along with many other aspects of the new movie, the plot hasn't quite been released, as it isn't known yet whether the movie itself will be a full-on fantasy film or rather a movie whose story is tied to the game but doesn't take place within the world of Dungeons & Dragons. The reason it's so difficult to say what the plot of the D&D movie might be is due to the fact that the entire point of the tabletop game is that dungeon masters are empowered to create their own worlds and narratives for the players to participate in. That said, there are books made for the gaming system. These self-contained stories serve as a kind of primer for new players, or as an out-of-a-pre-manufactured box option for simplicity. For example, the current 5e system for D&D has the Curse of Strahd book that was released in 2016. It's a pre-made adventure in which a local lord/vampire invites players to his castle for dinner. How players interact with him and the locals of the village determines the success of the party. However, there's always the possibility for a hybrid situation, something more like what we saw in the original Jumanji, although as of March 2019, a semi-final draft of the script was reportedly turned into Paramount. However, no details about the plot emerged, though the studio apparently found the work very exciting. Along with that announcement, a synopsis of the movie was also released, and reads as followed. An ex-harper turned thief escapes from prison with his partner, a female barbarian, and reunites with a no-talent wizard and a druid new to their team in an effort to rob the cheating conman who stole all their loot from the heist that landed them behind bars, and used it to install himself as the Lord of Neverwinter. Only the traitor is allied with a powerful red wizard who has something far more sinister in store. The movie will be directed by Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley, and will star Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez. As stated before, D&D is one of the trickier properties out there to adapt to film, given that aside from some story packs, the game is generally built around a player having free reign on a narrative, and the rest of the group playing through with characters and items from the world. And although the first film attempt from 2000 included some elements from the tabletop games, it took a far looser and more generic approach approach to adapting the game, which failed to resonate with general viewers or longtime fans of the series. The official synopsis may not give fans the details they're looking for, like who is playing which character class and faction, but it does at least indicate a far better use of the fantasy world than the generic epics and previous adaptations sought to create. The Italian job-like setup for the film's plot feels a far better way of introducing audiences to the atmosphere and nature of Dungeons & Dragons that could ultimately leave room for a bigger and bolder sequel should the film be successful. With it being a while before we see this D&D adaptation on our screens, there's still a ways to go before fans are likely to see any looks at what's to come from it. In the meantime, during the wait, now's a good time as any for newcomers to look into joining the D&D hype train before the film's arrival. So, who will star in the Dungeons & Dragons movie? Well, in some recent and exciting news, the production recently tapped 90s rom-com heartthrob and Paddington 2 villain Hugh Grant as the film's main antagonist, along with its Sophia Lillis in a yet unspecified role. Since plot details on the upcoming film based on the popular role-playing game have remained quite private so far, this is the first cast announcement to include names for the characters. Grant's villain has the incredible name of Forge Fletcher, and Lillis is playing someone named Doric. Grant and Lillis also join an already stacked cast that includes Wonder Woman's Chris Pine, Fast and Furious's Michelle Rodriguez, Pokémon Detective Pikachu's Justice Smith, and Bridgerton star Regé-Jean Page. Along with this amazing cast, Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley, who co-wrote Spider-Man Homecoming and directed the surprisingly great comedy Game Night, will write and direct the film for Paramount and E1, which is set to start filming this year. Highlighting the priority being given to the project, Warner Brothers Pictures already has a script written by David Leslie Johnson, who's known for also taking part in writing The Conjuring 2 and Wrath of the Titans. "We're so excited about bringing the world of Dungeons & Dragons to life on the big screen," said Greg Silberman, President, Creative Development and Worldwide Production, Warner Brothers Pictures. "This is far and away the most well-known brand in fantasy, which is the genre that drives the most passionate film followings. D&D has endless creative possibilities, giving our filmmakers immense opportunities to delight and thrill both fans and moviegoers new to the property," said Stephen Davis, Executive Vice President and Chief Content Officer of Hasbro Incorporated. "D&D is the role-playing game that started it all, and now we have the opportunity to ignite a franchise for its legions of avid fans in a way never done before." Another little exciting announcement was also made from Goldstein, where he announced to the world via Twitter that filming of the production was underway. The tweet consists of an up-close shot of the film's clapperboard with the Dungeons & Dragons logo displayed along the top. Goldstein and his co-director John Francis Daley are listed on the board, as well as Director of Photography Barry Peterson. The filming date on the lower right corner is April 29th, 2021. "The campaign begins, #D&D, was what he captioned the tweet. The big question, though, for many fans, is when will we finally get to see this adaptation on the big screen? Well, the upcoming Dungeons & Dragons movie has been delayed, moving it to a 2023 launch instead of the projected May 27th, 2022 release previously planned. The Dungeons & Dragons movie's new release date following the delay is now set for March 3rd, 2023, making it the second delay to hit the film since it was first announced. The first delay pushed the movie's release from November 19th, 2021 to May 27th, 2022. But COVID-related issues and the uncertainty surrounding the film industry's future forced plans to change. The film was expected to begin filming before summer this year in Ireland. The confirmation of the movie's delay did not confirm whether or not the production schedule was also pushed back. It's been a long time coming, though, with the filming rights to the property at the heart of a legal battle until a 2015 settlement. There's no release date for Dungeons & Dragons yet, but given the all-star cast and the long history of success that the writer-director duo are bringing to the table, it feels like D&D fans will have a lot to look forward to once this movie is ready for the silver screen. With that said, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thanks for watching.